Welcome back to the Question Blog Talk Radio conversation with Doug Pagitt and Steve Sherburne, our final segment here on Wednesday, May 13th. And the question was, what about a 1-inch layer sprayed on the underside of the roof decking?
Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you said underside of the roof decking. The underside of the roof decking, oftentimes it's referred to, when you insulate right up underneath the underside of the roof decking, it's referred to as a hot roof. And it's referred that way because you have no airspace underneath the shingle. And here's the challenge. There's certain municipalities in the Twin Cities for sure that don't allow that. And one of the main reasons you don't allow it is if you don't have quite the R value that you would need R50 up underneath that roof deck. Because R50 is going to prevent any sort of transfer of heat both from the inside to the out or from outside in. And what ends up happening is if you have an insufficient amount of insulation under there, you're still going to heat up under the underside of that roof. And there's no ventilation under there to keep it cold. And so you'll still end up with ice dams. The other problem that you'll get is you'll void the warranty on your shingle, because when there's no airflow underneath the shingle, no opportunity for air to pass underneath there, those shingles in the summertime get awfully hot and they will deteriorate a heck of a lot faster. So the hot roof is not a good option. There's a version of what you're talking about that's done by bringing the insulation to the outside of the roof deck, but then you would build an additional roof, like a false roof deck on top of the insulation, and you want to put an 1.5-inch gap underneath that. And that way you can get a sufficient amount of airflow underneath the actual shingles, the roof deck portion that holds the shingles, so that you can prevent overheating of the shingles, maintain your warranty on those, and also satisfy your municipality's requirements about a hot deck, hot roof.
Huh. Well, look at that, Mark. So basically, don't do that. Instead, just put another roof on, right?
Well, the
greater space, put another decking. And
this may or may not be what Mark is
20,
referring to.
30, 50 grand, something like that, you'll be all set.
Actually, it's not. It's about $15,000 to do a roof like that. But maybe what Mark is referring to, what we see a lot, is where you have an attic space.
I love you remodelers.
That is huge.
You guys talking like Cheerios level of expenditures.
$1.6
billion.
Oftentimes where we see this scenario, Mark, is when somebody has an attic space that they actually want to finish. And so what they're doing is they're putting an additional space up there in which the roof actually becomes a
ceiling,
wall, a ceiling or a wall to that new space. And that also adds a significant challenge. It doesn't really change anything we said, but if you aren't finishing your attic, the best place for your insulation is on the ceiling of the top floor. In other words, the floor of the attic. But if you're trying to finish an attic space, the proper way to do that is to fur the roof framing down 12 inches so that you have a distance between the drywall and the underside of the deck of 12 inches. Because then what you can do is run air chutes all the way underneath that, all the way up to the venting. Get airflow underneath the deck of the roof. Then what we recommend is a skim coat of sprayed polyurethane foam under there. And depending on the space, sprayed polyurethane foam has an R value, an aged R value of about R5.8 to R6, somewhere in there. It's one of the higher R values per inch that you can get out of a material. You can achieve R50 then with only 8 inches. But if you are using a batting or a blown-in cellulose, you want to go to 12 inches so you can get close to your R50. But the skim coat portion actually gives you your vapor barrier air seal all in one layer, plus it gives you 1 inch of insulation that's double the insulation of the rest of the wall. But that way, you're bringing your wall in, you're providing the air gap, airspace underneath the deck of the roof. You got plenty of insulation. That's the way to finish a space like that, assuming that's what you're referring to.
So you're saying just insulate the lid?
Yes. And in that it's not as simple as just insulating the lid. There's some details, particularly around the heel. And the heel is the portion of the roof that touches the top of the wall down where it gets really small and there's not a lot of space. There's a critical detail that needs to happen there. And it would be hard to describe with words and probably more accurate to describe in a picture or a diagram. But, yeah, I mean, essentially insulating the lid, doing a 1-inch sprayed foam as a sealed bypass over the top of the drywall or plaster and lath there, making sure to detail all of your penetrations, wires that come through, vents that come through. Some other scenarios that we run into in that attribute to an elevated temperature in a cold attic is that you'll have a bathroom fan that'll vent through the attic roof, and a lot of times that duct work that's supposed to go out through the roof isn't sealed and isn't insulated, so it's a heat source. We oftentimes find that attic vent or bath vent fans are just blowing hot, warm air right into the attic. It's not even going out.
Like the thing fell off or there's a big old hole in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other one is can lights or recessed lights. Recessed lights, can lights are not a good idea when they're installed in a ceiling that interfaces with a cold attic. And the reason is because they heat up. And a lot of insulators will tell you you can build a box, and its code requires to build a rigid foam box around that thing and then spray foam over it to insulate it. But what you find is when you put a 75-watt bulb in those things and you've got that thing airtight and sealed in just the right way,
90 seconds,
it overheats the light and it keeps shutting off. So
How do you like that?
you could do the $120 LED light bulb in the can light, but I tell you what, that's just an expensive, inefficient lighting system anyways. For a surface-mounted fixture with 2 light bulbs, you get as much light as about 15 can lights in a room. So use less energy anyway.
Yeah, well, and this is, I mean, the point that you brought up since your first episode here of the show, and that is for the do-it-yourselfer, when they say, oh, you know what, I've got an ice dam on my roof, what I need to go do is go to Home Depot and pick up some insulation and put it in my attic.
Yep. You could actually wreck your house.
You could wreck your house and everyone will die of carbon monoxide poisoning.
Definitely.
Come knocking at the door. You hear that knock on your door after you do that?
Do it yourself
That's
and you
the
will
grim.
die.
That's the grim reaper.
That's our motto.
But it is more complicated than you can do it. We can help tends to tell someone.
Yep, exactly.
So there's times in life where having a professional or knowing what in the world you're talking about sort of be helpful, which is why we have the question, a Blog Talk Radio conversation about home repair, home remodeling, and making things work at home. In other words, if you're in the Twin Cities, you ought to set your browser to smsbuilders.com and have the good Steve Sherber come over.
Eventually we'll have the Cocoon website up, which will have a ton of information regarding this type of stuff.
So we will talk to you tomorrow on the question, Blog Talk Radio conversation, weekdays with Doug Pagitt and Wednesdays, Steve Sherber. Over and out.